Hi everybody, Tuni here from Potential Sonity. In this video, we're going to sew the Idexa Pouch. And this pattern comes to you from Country Cow Designs. In March of 2024, I reached out to Joe at Country Cow Designs to ask for permission to make a sew-along video for two patterns, the Idexa Pouch and this one, the Idexa Pouch. I managed to get the Idexa Pouch video out, I think in 2024. The Idexa Pouch, however, took a little bit longer, about 2 years longer, but I did it! Now, the original pattern comes with a bunch of extra pockets. I believe there's an additional zip pocket with like 3 compartments at the front, a zipper pocket on the back. For me, when I make a pouch this size, I usually don't add extra pockets because I feel like it's a small pouch and I want a quick sew project. And I think this version of the Idexa Pouch turned out really cute. I like that it's still considered a quick sew, but having a different fabric for the base, it just makes it look more fancy as a pouch. If you would like to sew the pouch with all the pockets, there's a great video already on YouTube by Rogue Stitches, and I'll put the link to that video in the description for you. For my version, we're just going to stick with 1 compartment, very quick, very simple, but still super cute and awesome. I would like to thank Country Cow Designs for allowing me to share their pattern. Before we begin, one disclaimer for you, because I made considerable simplification to this pattern, there are going to be some differences in the sewing process. Therefore, I think it's best if you just watch the video as I go instead of like referring to the pattern instructions and then watch the video, because the process is a little bit different. Anyway, I hope you enjoy sewing the Idexa Pouch with me. Let's get started. Here are the pattern pieces that you're going to need for this version of the Idexa Pouch. First, you need piece A, the base panel, and you only need to cut 1. I am using faux leather for my pouch. If your fabric is more lightweight, such as quilted cotton, please make sure you interface it with something like SF101 or an equivalent medium weight interfacing. Next, you're going to need piece B, front exterior, and for this version, you're going to cut 2 of them. 1 for the front and 1 for the back. I am using quilted cotton, so I interfaced my pieces with SF101. Next, you're going to need piece F, top zip tab, and you're going to cut 1. You can use the exterior fabric, the lining fabric, or whatever fabric you want. I am using quilted cotton for this one. The next pattern piece that you're going to need is piece H. Lining panels. You're going to cut 2 of them, and I'm using quilted cotton for my lining panels, so I interfaced mine with SF101. Last but not least, you're going to need piece J, exterior stabilizer. I am using fusible fleece for my pouch. You can use sew-in foam or fusible foam. It's just going to be a little bit thicker. You need 1, and it needs to be cut on fold. And I'm going to show you how I cut mine in a moment. You also need a zipper. I like to cut my zippers a little bit longer. This one is 10 inches long. This one is a number 5 zipper. A smaller one, like a multi-purpose zipper, will also work as well. Now I'm going to show you how I cut piece J, the exterior stabilizer. Once again, you need 1 of these, and I'm using fusible fleece. So first, I'm going to trace the pattern, and then I'm going to flip it to the other side and then trace the other half because it needs to be cut on fold. One extra step that I'm going to do to reduce bulk is I'm going to come around with a different pen so you can see better, and then measure the seam allowance inside the lines, and these new lines are going to be where I cut. So I'm going to grab an orange marker and measure in 3/8 of an inch from all sides. Now the seam allowance for this pattern is 1/4 inch, but I just like to give myself a little bit of extra room to reduce bulk on my seams. And there you go. Next step, I'm going to cut my stabilizer along the orange lines. In addition to your typical sewing notions like your thread, your scissors, these are some specific notions that I think would make your sewing experience more enjoyable. Let's start with presser feet. The majority of this project involves attaching the zipper tape to the pouch. So I'll be using my zipper foot. This is a typical zipper foot on a low shank machine. Since I'll be sewing on my Janome HD9, my zipper foot will look a little bit different, and this is what it looks like. I will also be using my walking foot to sew vinyl and fabric together. Since sometimes vinyl can be a little sticky to your typical presser foot, you can also use a Teflon foot if you have one. In terms of needles, I will be using an 8012 Microtex needle. These are also called sharp needles, and they are good for top stitching. If you don't have any on hand, a universal needle will work just fine. I will also be using my hump jumper, which is what the blue thing is, and this one was 3D printed by my husband. This is going to be good for when you're sewing literally over a hump. Number 3 here means this one is 3 millimeters thick. If you don't have a hump jumper, you can also use cardboard or just fold a small piece of fabric multiple times to make it the thickness that you want. The next notion is called a stiletto. For this sewing project, its main purpose is going to be my extra finger, so I won't have to put any of my fingers near the needle as it's going up and down. Another great tool to use here is a friction pen or a heat erasable pen. You can make markings on your fabric and use the heat of your iron to make the ink disappear. However, I've noticed that it leaves some marks on certain fabrics, so please test it first. Next, it's always nice to have a small clear ruler. This one is from a quilt shop in Clearwater, Florida. And finally, clips. One weird thing about me is that it bugs me when I put 2 clips of the same color next to each other. So I would try to avoid doing that, unless I'm really tired and then I just don't care. Do you have this problem? All right, let's get sewing. Step 1, you're going to sew the exterior pieces to the base panel. Now you have 2 exterior pieces, and the bottom is going to be the wider part of your exterior pieces. So that's the part that you are going to attach to the base panel. I'm going to line them up just to show you what your exterior panel would look like once all the pieces are sewn together. All right, now you're going to flip one of your exterior pieces right sides together with the base panel, and I marked the middle of the base panel and the exterior pieces just so I could line them up. I'm going to clip them together, and when I'm done, I'm going to move to the other side and do the same thing. Now that we've clipped the exterior pieces to the base panel, we're going to go to our sewing machine and stitch with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So this is what the exterior panel looks like. Next, I'm going to go to my iron and press the exterior pieces on top of the seams that I just sewed. Because my base is vinyl, I'm going to cover my exterior panel with a pressing cloth to prevent my vinyl from melting. If you're not sure if your material can handle the heat, you can also just finger press. After that, I'm going to top stitch my exterior pieces to the seam allowances. I'm stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the base panel, and I'm using a longer stitch length. Step 2, I'm going to fuse my fusible fleece to my exterior panel. And because I cut out the seam allowances, I'm going to center my fusible fleece on the wrong side of my exterior panel, like that. Because I'm using vinyl, I'm going to put my pressing cloth on top of my exterior panel and press on the wrong side of the vinyl. Then I'm going to go to my iron and fuse it. If you are using sewing foam or something that's not fusible, you baste the foam to your exterior panel with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Step 3, we're going to sew our zipper tab to the zipper tape. I'm going to grab my zipper tab pattern piece F. Then I'm going to fold the short sides together and press, and then unfold and then press the two ends again so that it looks like that. So when you unfold it, you will see 4 equal sections. Now that I've prepared my zipper tab, I'm going to sew it to my zipper tape. And I'm going to sew it on the side of the zipper tape that opens. As I was doing my voiceover for this part, I realized that I should have been more clear in terms of where you should put your zipper tab. I'm showing you 2 examples here. The pink zipper tape is your typical all-purpose zipper. You see that it has a metal stop on the right side. If your zipper looks like the pink one, you're going to put your zipper tab on the side of the metal stop, but not right on top of it, because if you sew on top of the metal stop, your needle might break. The blue zipper tape is called continuous zipper tape. This type of zipper doesn't come with a metal stop. So a way to tell which side to put your zipper tab on is to unzip the zipper. Whichever direction the zipper opens, that's the side you're going to put your zipper tab on. Mine opens to the right side, so I'm going to put my zipper tab on the right side of the zipper tape. One more way to tell which side to put the zipper tab on is to turn your zipper to the back side. You will see that your zipper pull has the round side and the flat side. The side that opens is going to be the flat side. So that's the side you're going to put your zipper tab on. I hope this helped. Let's move on. I'm going to wrap my zipper tab on the zipper tape, and then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and attach it by stitching 1/8 of an inch next to the opening. Step 4. Now I'm going to sew my zipper tape to the pouch. I'm going to start with the exterior, so you can leave your lining panels aside. You need your exterior piece and your zipper tape. Place the exterior right side up. At the top, you're going to measure and mark 1/2 inch in from each side. Repeat with the other side of the exterior. To sew the zipper tape to your pouch, you're going to start with the front exterior panel. So whichever side you want to be the front of your pouch, you're going to start there. Put the exterior panel right side up and then place the zipper right side down on top. The zipper tab should be on the right side. Line up the end of the zipper tab to the mark that you just made on the right side, and then clip the zipper tape to the pouch. Right here you can see that I am making a mark 1/2 inch from the edge because that's where I'm going to fold my zipper tape. So I'm going to unzip my zipper and then grab one end of my zipper tape, the end that I'm sewing, and I'm going to fold that end where I drew my line and then clip it to the pouch. So I'm using one hand to hold the zipper tape in place and then the other hand to make the fold. And now you're going to see a 45-degree angle where the fold is. It's very likely going to unfold once I get to the sewing machine. You can hand baste it to just keep it in place, but I'm too lazy, so I'm just going to clip it for now. Then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and baste the zipper to the pouch with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now we're going to baste the zipper tape to the pouch. The trick here is to go slow and keep the fold of your zipper tape intact. I'm using my zipper foot here. I'm also going to be using my stiletto to hold the zipper tape in place so it doesn't move as I'm sewing. Take your time, and if you mess up the first time, just try again. Next, we're going to attach a lining panel to the pouch. So grab one of your lining panels. I have made a little snip in the middle of my lining panel, and I'm going to line that up with the exterior panel. I'm going to place my lining panel right side down so you see the interfacing on the back. Line up the middle and then clip it to the pouch. Then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and stitch the lining to the pouch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Because there are zipper teeth at the beginning of that seam, sometimes it's a little difficult to feed through that part, so I'm using my hump jumper to help with that. It's also a good idea to unzip your zipper to move the zipper pull out of the way. As you can see, my sewing machine is struggling to sew past the zipper, so I'm just placing my hump jumper right behind the needle. And now it's doing much better. Don't forget to back stitch at the beginning, but do it slowly. At this point, I noticed that because I struggled to sew through the zipper teeth at the beginning, I didn't start at the very beginning of that seam, so there's a gap. So I flipped the pouch over and just sew the rest of the seam to close the gap. At this point, I'm going to trim my loose threads. I'm also going to trim the tail of my zipper tape that's hanging out there. Now I'm going to top stitch the seam allowance to the exterior panel. So I'm going to fold the seam allowance down so that it's going the same direction as the exterior panel and not the lining panel. I'm going to go to my iron and press that seam down. And when I top stitch, I'm going to start about 1/2 inch from the top and then go straight down to 1/2 inch from the bottom. So basically where your zipper tape is. I'm still using my zipper foot because I want to get as close to the edge as I can. I'm going to start about 1/2 inch in, so just right about where the zipper tab is. I'm going to sew 1/8 inch away from the seam, and my stitch length is going to be 3.5 millimeters. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end of my seam as well. I'm going to stop about 1/2 inch away from the edge of the fabric, and once again, back stitch. So this is how the top stitching looks like. The goal here is to keep the seam allowance under the exterior side of the bag and not the lining side of the bag. I'm not an expert, but this method gives me a good result at the end. I hope it serves you well too. We're halfway done with the zipper tape. Now I'm going to attach the zipper tape to the other side of the pouch, which is the back. I'm going to put my exterior panel right side up, and I'm flipping the direction of my pouch so that the back of the pouch is at the top. Now I'm going to grab my zipper tape, hold it up, and then put it right side down, line it up with the back panel. And I'm starting 1/2 inch from the edge again. I'm going to clip it to the pouch. When I get to the tail of my zipper tape, I'm going to fold it like that again so that I get a 45-degree fold. And I'm folding the tape 1/2 inch from the edge where I made my marking earlier, and then I'm going to clip it to the pouch. Now I'm going to go to my sewing machine and baste this side of the zipper tape to the pouch with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. This side of the zipper tape is easier to sew, but when you get to this point, you're going to fold your zipper tape just carefully and slowly if you didn't hand baste it because you're lazy like me. But with patience, I guarantee that it's going to work. So just carefully fold it and then slowly baste that to the pouch. If you want to hold the tail of your zipper tape, use a stiletto, not your finger. Not a good idea. Next, I'm going to attach the other lining panel to my pouch. Similar to the first one, you're going to grab your remaining lining panel and then put it right sides together with your pouch. So I have my pouch right side up. I'm going to place my lining panel right side down. I'm also going to line up the center of my lining panel with the center of the pouch. Clip the pieces together and then sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Next, I'm going to trim the tail of my zipper tape. I'm going to go to my iron and press the seam under the exterior of the zipper pouch before I top stitch it to the zipper pouch. In my humble opinion, I think the next part is the most challenging of the entire sewing process of this pouch. I'm going to top stitch the seam to the exterior panel. Now this one's going to be tricky because you have that zipper tab at the end, so you can't open the pouch all the way. I'm going to show you how I do it, but the key here is it doesn't have to be perfect. In my opinion, the easiest way to do this is to start on the opposite side of the zipper tab, as you can see here. Once again, I'm going to start sewing a 1/2 inch from the edge and 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper. Back stitch at the beginning. Once you get towards the end, closer to the zipper tab, it's going to get a little harder. Just go slowly and carefully manipulate the fabric so that you could get a little bit further at a time. This is why we're not top stitching all the way to the edge. My goal here is to get to where the zipper teeth meet the fabric, and then I will stop. If you can back stitch, do so slowly. If you cannot, you can always tie a knot on the wrong side of the fabric. I have sewn quite a few of these pouches. This part is the most cumbersome, but patience goes a long way here. We did it! Now, step 5, final assembly. Woohoo! You can see that from the front, the zipper opens from left to right, and you can see the top stitching. And this is what it looks like on the back. And there are no top stitching lines on the inside of the pouch. Now I'm going to turn the bag inside out, and I'm going to sew the lining pieces together and the exterior pieces together. Well, it's one piece, but I'm going to sew the two sides together. You want to make sure that your zipper pull is somewhere in the middle so it doesn't get in the way. And then flip the pouch so that the lining pieces are right sides together and the exterior panel is right sides together as well. I'm going to start stitching from the bottom of the exterior panel all the way to the bottom of the lining panel on either side. Now you need to leave an opening somewhere in your lining to turn the bag right side out at the end. You can choose whether you want that opening to be on one of the sides of the lining or at the bottom. I'm going to leave my opening at the bottom of my lining. And I'm just measuring the width of my hand to make sure that I have enough room to put my hand inside and turn the bag right side out. When you clip or pin your exterior pieces together, make sure you line up the seams of the base panel and the exterior top panels. And also make sure that you line up the seams between the exterior and the lining. Now I'm going to mark my opening for the bottom part of the lining. For these 3 seams, I'm going to be sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. To make the exterior seams a little bit more secure, I go back and stitch a second line within the seam allowance, like right next to the first line. And I don't stitch all the way. I just stitch the exterior pieces and then I stitch a little bit of the lining and then I stop. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Wherever your opening is on your lining, just make sure that you leave that gap. So for me, it's at the bottom. I'm going to start sewing from the top edge to my first marking and then back stitch. And then I'm going to leave the gap in the middle and then stitch where my second marking is all the way to the bottom edge. This next step is not required, but it's going to make your life easier at the end of this sewing process. I'm going to go to my iron and press the seam at the bottom of my lining up so that when I turn the pouch right side out, it will be easier for me to top stitch that seam closed. You'll see. And this is what it looks like after I press my seams. We're getting so close to finishing the bag. Next, I'm going to box the corners. I'm going to start with the exterior. I snipped the middle of the bottom of the base and I'm going to line that mark with the seam. And I will push the seam allowance to one side, doesn't matter which side, and then clip the seam in place. I'm going to repeat on the other side of the exterior as well, and I'm going to make sure that the seam allowance goes to the same direction. I don't think the direction of the seams matters too much, but it keeps my brain calm. For the lining, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to push the seam allowances to the opposite side of the exterior. So whichever direction your seam allowance is for the exterior, the lining is going to be the opposite. For the lining pieces, make sure that your seams line up so they look nice. And if you press your bottom seam like I did, you can just leave that seam open. Now I'm going to go and sew these 4 little seams with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. For the exterior, because I'm using vinyl, I have to increase my stitch length. So I'm going to use a 3mm stitch length. If you're using quilt cotton, you can use a 2.5. Again, to secure the vinyl or the faux leather, I'm going to be stitching a second line within the seam allowance right next to the first line. For the lining, because I'm using quilting cotton, I'm going to be sewing with a 2.5mm stitch length. Moment of truth, let's turn the bag right side out. Carefully reach inside the bag and then push the right side of the fabric out slowly. If your zipper is halfway closed like mine, you can gently push it open so you can get the exterior side out a little bit more easily. Check to make sure that all your seams look good. The last step is you're going to sew your opening closed, and this is when you can see that pressing the seam earlier makes it look really nice and neat. I'm going to go to my sewing machine and basically top stitch the seam closed with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Ta-da! Oh, this pouch is adorable. Let's admire the beautiful pouch, shall we? I hope this video was helpful and I hope you enjoyed sewing the Idexa pouch. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!